Welcome. You are now tuned into Mild's Culture Plate. I am your host, Mild, Kevin Miles. It is Wednesday, January 4th, 2023, and we have a packed show for you today. Unlike my last show, which, dear Lord, I'm sorry if you had to watch that. That was painstaking. I literally had no topics and wound up reading the CNN celebrity death list for 2022, and I am so sorry about that. That was not a good show, and I apologize. I tried to do my best to dig up something to talk about, but man, it was just a crazy weekend. Go ahead and hit my vape. We have several topics to talk about tonight. Let me go ahead and the whiskey of the evening is Jim Beam Black Extra Aged Bourbon. So, got a little bit of the Beam going on. You know, just grabbing what I could grab at the store. You know, definitely got lots of nice big bottles, but we're going to try this one out. Extra Aged Bourbon, not sure what kind of aging it has, but yeah, it's 43% alcohol by volume, 86 proof. We'll try it out here in just a moment. But first, I need to talk about something. Many of you are hyper aware of some events that took place on a certain sporting event Monday evening. And yes, I'm talking about Damar Hamlin. In the middle of a football game, Monday Night Football, Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin had made a tackle and then stood up and suffered some kind of medical episode. And I was watching live. I try not to make this a sports related channel. I don't really talk sports, but I do watch sports. I caught it live, and I as the evening went on, there were a lot of questions as to what was going on. My understanding is they used the AED defibrillator device to try to jumpstart his pulse. They were giving him CPR to try to get him breathing again. And they eventually did get a pulse. They took him to the hospital. And ever since then, there has been a certain amount of media coverage surrounding safety in sports, surrounding whether or not the NFL should have forced the players to continue playing the game that night. What the protocol should be for a sports network to leave announcers hanging without developments, without, proceeding to other programming. Because there were, if you're in that position where, like I'm talking to you right now, where you're trying to talk to an audience about something that had just happened, one thing you don't want to do is speculate too much about the important medical information about what just happened in front of you. You can't really go into detail like that. You can't speculate. You can't really talk about sorry, trying to spread the link here and it's not working. Or is it? I can't tell. Well then, I give up. Okay, I was going to try to spread the link. So if you're watching, thank you for showing up. I can't really tell what's what right this moment, but let's see here. Okay, yeah, we're no concurrent viewers right now, I don't think. Okay, but so yes, Damar Hamlin. This has been a subject of many conversations in real life and across media and across social media, and of course, I wish him the best. I hope for a full and speedy recovery. There are a lot of people who may be speculating about different things that could have contributed to his condition. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm merely asking to leave it in the hands of the universe, of his creator, his family, his doctors, and wish him the best and a full, speedy recovery. Now, having said that, this person, this Damar Hamlin seems like a genuinely good dude. He formed this charity, was trying to make sure kids got Christmas gifts for Christmas. From what I understand, is he was otherwise also charitable. His teammates seemed to genuinely love the dude to where they were in tears when this happened. So yeah, nothing but the best for my dude. Like, I hope the NFL, I hope his doctors, spare no expense at trying to bring him back to a full, healthy life. But what sucks is there are lots of other people who deserve this kind of attention, who deserve this kind of feedback, and nothing against the wonderful love that Mr. Hamlin is receiving. But I also want to take another moment to think about all the other people who are currently suffering from heart ailments, strokes, cancer, other disorders. Last weekend, Jim Medeker, who has been apparently suffering from stage 4 cancer and hasn't been streaming as much as he did in his heyday, did a nice little roast stream to the biggest train wreck of 2022, and then he gave his final send-off, and he's kind of said that he's not going to create any more online content because his health has taken a downturn. And so prayers to Jim Medeker. There are some other figures who have recently passed away or recently developed some serious ailments, and I want to give my prayers to them as well. There have been some good reports post-surgery for Richard Hogue of Hogue Law. You may remember, if you've been following my stream, there was some LawTube drama a couple of months back to where I sat right here in this chair, looked right into this camera and said, "Fuck you, Richard Hogue." But online beef is online beef, and quite frankly, when a man suffers a stroke and is laying in a hospital bed and relying on other people and machines and prayers to get better. That's not a time for beef. And no matter what had happened between Hogue and Nick Rekieta, and Nick Rekieta also has wished him well. I want to send my prayers also to Richard Hogue, and I hope you also make a full recovery. I've spent a lot of time in my adult years in doctors' offices and in hospitals visiting my loved ones. And so, even people I disagree with, I don't wish that upon a family or a life. That kind of thing, that kind of resentment, that kind of hatred takes its toll. One moment real quick while I cough. So yeah, if you've got a loved one out there, if you, the viewer, if you've got a loved one in the hospital, or you've got a loved one that's got an uncurable condition or a potentially fatal disorder or disease, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes here at the beginning of my show to give you a toast. You, the average person out there who also has to deal with the realities of life and death and the realities of having a sick loved one or someone you care for who may be suffering in some way. I wish you the best. I wish you strength, and I wish you a healthy, happy, vibrant future, whatever that may bring. Cheers. I'm going to give a moment of silence while I actually make the prayers that I just said I was going to make. Amen. So, now having said the sad part, let's get into the headlines. So one thing I haven't been covering that I probably should have covered, that's been kind of a big news story the last couple weeks, is the Idaho college murders, which again, I'm not very familiar with this case. However, there was an interesting little tidbit that I saw some people talking about today, and I thought, well, that's a good topic to talk about. Because it's not necessarily about murder, but it's about something that is just as dangerous. So let me go ahead and bring this up. From ABC 25 WPBF News, I guess this is Palm Beach News, genealogists able to identify Brian Kohberger as Idaho murder suspect within days. Groundbreaking case of real-time DNA detecting. So again, they weren't really sure who had committed these murders. But let's see how they figured it out. A source close to the Idaho student murders investigation said it only took genetic genealogists. Come on, really, reporters? Really, reporters? Genetic genealogists. People. A matter of days to identify Brian Kohberger as the suspect. According to one expert, genealogy, while often used to solve cold cases such as the Golden State Killer, has never been used in a real-time ongoing investigation to lead police to a suspect. The source tells WPBF and 25 News investigative reporter Terry Parker the genealogy part of the investigation went remarkably quickly, but police first had a daunting task of collecting DNA in a chaotic crime scene. Crime scene investigators scoured the Moscow, Idaho house where 4 college students, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, Zana Kernudel, and Madison Mogan, were found stabbed to death in their beds. Retired FBI Special Agent John McVeigh said it is likely crime scene technicians had to first separate the victims and other people's DNA from the killers, which was a huge undertaking. They're going to have to analyze that, and they're going to have to go through every droplet and things like that, because if the suspect cut himself, he clearly wasn't bleeding as bad as they were. So you could have one droplet somewhere and you're looking at a room and there's droplets all over the place. You're testing every single one of them, McVeigh said. Police ran the unknown DNA through National CODIS and DNA database, but came up empty because Kohberger had no criminal history. The government didn't have his DNA. The government had nothing to compare his DNA to. Think about this for a minute. The police, the government, had nothing to tie the killer to the DNA they found at the scene. But that's when sources say, back to the article, that's when sources say police had genetic genealogists, again, genetic genealogists, had scientists upload the samples to a public database such as Family Tree DNA looking for matching relatives. So, let's stop right there. So you, the viewer, you think it's neat. You buy your brother 23andMe for Christmas or Ancestry for Christmas. And they do the swab. They mail it in. Next thing you know, you got a second cousin, a distant second cousin, gets arrested for fucking murder. This is some fucking creepy shit, yo. Police are now putting DNA from crime scenes into Ancestry Family Tree DNA services. Here we go. Genealogists then built a family tree using birth and death records, census records, and other hints until they had a whole tree of that extended family going back generations. At that point, they moved downward from great fucking come on, get a damn editor. Great-great-parents, great-grandparents, to living people looking to see who is the right age, lives in the area, and could be a possible suspect. Sources said they narrowed down possible suspects to Kohberger, and police determined he drove a white Elantra like that seen near the crime scene. That's when FBI started tracking him and apparently collected some discarded item with Kohberg's DNA on it, which police say they positively matched to the crime scene. That's the clincher evidence. The genealogy is just an amazing tool that got them there. Ladies and gentlemen, we frequently will just discard our biometric data at an alarming rate. I mean, you can't help but leave some spit around or some fingerprints around. But to think that even a family member that I may disagree with politically, someone I don't even talk to, someone I don't even consider close to me, but because we share a bloodline, we share some chromosomes, and they go into 23andMe or Family Tree DNA or Ancestry.com. I'm sorry, I keep wanting to call it Ancestry because I used to make a joke about it. Like, people were using it as a dating service. It was a whole fucking thing. Anyway, but yeah, Ancestry, all these, to think that someone out of your control can do this, and police can then utilize that service as if they were a member of your family, as if they were you looking for a tree to connect this DNA to. This is crazy. I mean, look, don't fucking murder people. I mean, really, don't fucking murder people and leave your fucking DNA at the crime scene. Don't rape people and leave your DNA. I mean, don't murder or rape people anyway, but there's a slippery slope here, okay? Like, it's one thing if we're using this technology to find rapists and murderers. I have no fucking problem with that. Use it to find pedophiles or child traffickers. No problem with that. But once this becomes a valid tool for police to use for law enforcement purposes, what's to prevent? I mean, look, they've already got CODIS. They've already got their own database. But now they're relying on databases in the public sector. Pretty fucking scary thought, if you ask me. Like, their database didn't work. They found no hits, no matches, nothing to even go on. But then they went, again, like they were one of the guy's family members, and put his DNA in there. Honestly, I think that should be a terms of service thing. I think that should be a Fourth Amendment violation. Something. There should be something there to prevent a third party from putting your DNA into a database, even if it's found at a crime scene. Like, there's something about that that's just a bridge too fucking far for me. Anyway, so let's move on. I want to bring up something. And look, I've always said one thing I try not to do is I try not to cover LawTube. I've talked quite a bit about LawTube, and I will continue to talk quite a bit about LawTube. And I even hate the term LawTube, just like Nick Rekieta hates the term LawTube. So let me just state for the fact that, I'm not one of these people. And again, nothing against Law Nerd Clips or Divinity Said or some of these other people online. But I don't cover LawTube or LawTube drama. And so I try not to make news stories out of the LawTube figureheads. And I know I'd already kind of, gave a prayer earlier for Mr. Hogue of Hogue Law. But there was a fucking spot-on thread on Twitter where Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Logic, kind of was responding to someone who made some claims about the differences between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. And I do want to cover that because he made some good points. And so let's bring this up real quick. So the original tweet was this Tamara Doherty, and please don't message this person. Please don't try to ratio this person. Don't interact with this person. Please don't. Trump's rhetoric of hate is actually what did it. I didn't think Obama spoke in hateful rhetoric. Never have I seen this until Trump. I am 53 years old and I can't believe we're here at all. We need to come together and work it out. Compromise. So, Joe says, I believe you mean well, so for you and countless others, I will walk you through it. I know you didn't think Obama spoke with hateful rhetoric. His speeches were surgical precision, a work of art in how to poison a mind. He would never say they are racist. That was too overt. Instead, on virtually every topic, he would mischaracterize the reasons that his policies were opposed and instead paint the right's opposition as motivated exclusively by racism, greed, and, or, at best, irrational fear. For example, when Obama ran for office, he was further left than anybody who ever held the White House. That was the root of the opposition. He would frame such opposition as some folks aren't comfortable with voting for someone like me. I don't look like the face on printed money. The obvious takeaway is the only reason to vote against me is because you hate black people. Yet shrewdly never saying it that way, never deemed as taking victim status or being divisive. It was brilliant. It made his followers hate the evil racists who voted against him. Illegal immigrants flooding our border. The right was just upset because it created security risks, drained jobs from Americans, and was sure to increase crime. How did Obama frame it? Some folks aren't comfortable with folks who are browner than them coming in here, but America was built on immigration. I.e., the only reason anybody hates my immigration policies is because they hate anybody who isn't white. On taxes, if you have a company, you didn't build that. It took roads and bridges to deliver your goods. You need to pay your fair share. Translation, they're greedy. Their stuff belongs to us. 8 years of this seeped into the minds of his followers. It was routine messaging that the right was never about a difference in policy for building a healthy America, but rather motivated by very evil people with a very evil agenda. People who need to be stopped at all costs. This was why Hillary wasn't saying anything shocking in 2016 when she referred to 40% of the country being "you're racists, you're misogynists, you're homophobes, a basket of deplorables." Both sides have been listening to Obama say that about the right for 8 plus years. Do not mistakenly believe that the right missed it. We heard it. It was highly offensive and utter bullshit. By the time Hillary lumped it together as deplorables, the right embraced that as a rallying cry. We are the outcasts, the ostracized, the deplorables. Fuck you. The media ran with it in desperately trying to find ways to label Trump a racist. He had been in the public spotlight for 4 decades, never used the N-word or disparaged blacks or Latinos, one of the first to support gays, but immediately labeled by the media as racist. Allowed his own daughter to convert to Judaism, yet labeled an anti-Semite. So he smartly pointed out that the media was fake. It was clear that any candidate from the right would have been labeled by the media as a racist, misogynist, homophobic anti-Semite. It was always BS, and it all started with Obama. Obama successfully seeded in his followers a genuine belief that the right was comprised exclusively of evil Nazis and that their leader was the next Hitler. Evil fascist tyrant, whoever their leader would be. This is essential to understand because no reasonable person negotiates with genuine evil. You do not cave to evil unless you are yourself evil. There is no compromise. The only proper way to deal with perceived evil is to eradicate, either through silencing or worse. The point is that if Ted Cruz had won the 2016 GOP nomination, he would have been labeled Hitler, or Rubio, or Bush. It didn't matter who the name was, that just dictated the target. But the direction and the agenda had been established years before, and it all started with Obama. Side note, the quotes from Obama Hillary aren't intended to be precisely lifted from speeches, rather they are intended to convey in condensed form the messaging that was routinely incorporated in their talking points. So fucking bravo, Joe. Joe Neerman, good logic. Give you a clap. Again, I don't make this show about idolizing members of LawTube or followers of Nick Rekieta, but I will say fucking spot on takedown of what the hell happened with the left's view of the right in the last several years. And how this racial dynamic isn't a one-way street. Okay, so next we'll go into the House of Representatives. Now, if you're not familiar with what's going on there, let me just bring you up to speed. I kind of got to bring myself up to speed somewhat. We had an election. An election in which there were more Republicans that wound up in the House of Representatives than Democrats. As such, Nancy Pelosi stepped down as Speaker of the House. Yay. And it was highly speculated that Kevin McCarthy would be the establishment Republican choice for the next Speaker of the House. However, if you're not also familiar, right now the Republican Party is heavily fractured between establishment Republicans, MAGA-type Republicans, and more libertarian-type Republicans. And so the Republican Party, even though great in numbers, they're not a unified force. As such, up until now, and maybe even further, but up until now, let's go to the post-millennial here. Okay, 20 GOP back Byron Donalds as Kevin McCarthy loses a fourth vote for House Speaker. And you see this little screenshot here. So you have Jeffries, which is Hakeem Jeffries, who's a Democrat, got 212 votes, which isn't 50%. You have Kevin McCarthy got 201 votes, which also is not 50%. Byron Donalds got 20 votes. Other people got 0 votes, and one person voted present. Anyway, fourth vote for the House Speaker on Wednesday resulted in no one gaining enough votes to attain the speakership. The House remains leaderless, pending a fifth vote for House Speaker. 20 in the GOP voted for Donalds over McCarthy, and Victoria Spartz of Indiana, there you go, voted present. This despite negotiations Tuesday night that were intended to secure a victory for McCarthy. After 3 contentious votes were held on the House floor on Tuesday, with the GOP nominating Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, Byron Donalds, and Andy Biggs, the Democrats had one candidate, Hakeem Jeffries of Brooklyn, who continues to earn all 212 Democrat votes. McCarthy was believed to be seeking an adjournment of the House until Thursday, likely knowing he did not have the votes. 218 votes were needed to attain the speakership, and dissension among the ranks of the GOP led to fights on the House floor, exhibiting a raucous and rebellious form of democracy that's not been seen for over a century. Texas Republican Chip Roy pointed this out while nominating his friend Byron Daniels, saying the kind of debate that was seen on the floor over the House Speaker should be present for all the most pressing issues before Congress. And we're going to skip this first video. We'll go into the second video. So let's...
This country needs a change. This country needs leadership that does not reflect this city, this town that is badly broken. The House of Representatives is the people's house. It represents the entirety of our country, and we each represent some 750,000 people. And we come here, and here we sit in a room filled with those representatives. And my friend, Mr. Gallagher, and he is my friend, and I agree with him on many things. And I agree with almost everything that you were talking about. But we should be in here having this kind of a conversation with this many people in the room about Ukraine. And we should debate the merits, and we should debate the ups and downs of being involved. We should debate the $45 billion. We should debate whether it should be more or less. We should debate whether it should be paid for. We should debate what the result we should demand. The only way you're going to get that is if you change the rules and have the leadership to advance the rules to make sure that we can do that.
Now, I'm not familiar with Representative Roy out of Texas, but he's fucking kind of right there. You know, like, why do we have a Congress that just doesn't read the bills, doesn't debate the bills? Their votes are highly fucking politicized. Why are most of these votes taking place on a House floor where only like 20% of the members are present? Roy was one of the holdouts demanding a change in leadership away from McCarthy and the GOP establishment. McCarthy was endorsed by Donald Trump. So again, I mean, fair enough, but he's still an establishment Republican. So what does Matt Gaetz have to say? Matt Gaetz.
McCarthy to solicit a list and then use that list in some way to try to divide our conference. But look, he's a desperate guy whose vote share is dropping with every subsequent vote, and I'm ready to vote all night, all week, all month, and never for that person. So I tell you what, when he comes out and heads back to his squatting in the Speaker's office, which why is he even allowed to be there? Like, is there some basis in law or statute or rule for someone who comes in second place in 6 consecutive speaker races to be able to assume the Speaker's office? But when he comes out here, ask him if he apologized there to me in private, and ask him why in my discussion with him he was making effort.
So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he was talking about there at the end, but, you know, apparently there are a lot of Republicans and highly visible Republicans that aren't happy with McCarthy. I just don't want to see more establishment bullshit. I don't want to see more of the same. I don't want to see Nancy Pelosi diet, like, give us something new. Give us an actual fucking an actual fucking democracy. A representative republic, if you will. That's actually representative of the people that fucking sent you there. Speaking of representative of people, we're going to move on to our last news story of the day. In the National Post, what's going on? There we go. Jordan Peterson, I will risk my license to escape social media re-education. The Ontario College of Psychologists wants to retrain me to behave properly, and this should concern everyone. The practice of psychology in Ontario and in many other North American and Western jurisdictions is subject to regulation by the professional colleges, essentially governmental organizations with a mandate to protect the public from misconduct on the part of physicians, lawyers, social workers, dentists, pharmacists, teachers, architects, and many others, including and most relevant to Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologists. Anywhere in the world can levy a complaint to these regulatory bodies for any reasons, regardless whether the complainant has had any direct contact with the professional in question. The respective colleges have the responsibility to determine whether each complaint is serious and credible enough to warrant further investigation. Complaints can be deemed vexatious or frivolous and dispensed with. When the college decides to move forward, it is a serious move, essentially equivalent to a lawsuit. The Ontario College of Psychologists, in fact, recommends legal counsel under such conditions. The Ontario College of Psychologists has levied a multitude of such lawsuits against me since my rise to public prominence 6 years ago, although none at all in the 20 or so years I practiced as a psychologist before that. These have multiplied as of late and now number more than a dozen. This may seem like a lot, and where there's smoke, there's fire, or so people think, but I might point out that it is difficult to communicate with as many people as I do and to say anything of substance without rubbing at least a few of them the wrong way every now and then. And let's stop right there. I need to put you folks on hold for just a minute. I'm being called away. Please hold my chair stream. Okay, I am back. For my crimes, I have been sentenced to a course of mandatory social media communication training with the college's so-called experts. Although social media communication training is not a scientific and certainly not a clinical specialty of any standing, I am to do this at my own expense, some hundreds of dollars per hour, and for a length of time that is determined only by those retraining me and profiting from doing so. How will this be determined? When those very re-educators, those experts, have convinced themselves that I have learned my lesson and will behave properly in the future. So, I mean, we've seen this with Nick Rekieta, where Nick Rekieta had upset activists in a certain community, and they submitted several complaints to the Minnesota Lawyers Ethics, whatever group that was. And so now you're seeing it with Jordan Peterson, where, you know, people have submitted complaints, the board investigates, and, you know, what do you do? What do you do? Yep, here we are. Okay, not sure what happened with that little internet hiccup. Anyway, so what do you do? What do you do if you are an online figure and you've had to pay to go through school, training, get a degree, get licensed as a professional in your field? And all it takes is a number of activists to file successive complaints against you to a certain ethics board. And now you're deemed unable to partake in your profession. Your profession. And I want to be clear about that. Your profession. Nobody owns being a lawyer. Nobody owns being a psychologist. And if you're an average person who has spent the time and money going through classes, going through school, going through postgraduate, going through a licensure process, and in the case of Jordan Peterson, then going on to teach at university and getting some kind of a tenured track, you know, like not official tenureship, but, you know, like you have taught this for years. You have had these subjects for years. You have had a mixture of reality and psychology and theology. Like, this isn't new. Like, your perspective, your course, your outlook is not new. Like he said, he didn't receive none at all in the 20 years or so I practiced as a psychologist before that. It wasn't until he became a public figure in the news and certain activists felt the need to destroy him. It's worse than you think in Canada, Elon Musk. Regulated professionals are now terrified. I accidentally clicked it into silence by their respective colleges. This means they're no longer able to say what they believe to be true. And who needs that from their lawyers, physicians, or psychologists? Exactly. If I agree to this, then I must admit that I've been unprofessional in my conduct, and to have that noted publicly, even as the college insists that I am not required to admit any wrongdoing if I refuse, and I have, of course, refused. The next step is a mandatory public disciplinary session/inquiry and the possible suspension of my clinical license, all of which will also be announced publicly. I should also point out that the steps already taken constitute the second most serious possible response to my transgressions on the part of the college. I have been placed in the category of repeat offender with high risk of further repetition. What exactly have I done that is so seriously unprofessional that I am now a danger not only to any potential new clients, but to the public itself? It is hard to tell with some of the complaints. One involved the submission of the entire transcript of a 3-hour discussion on the Joe Rogan podcast. But here are some examples that might produce some reasonable concern among Canadians who care about such niceties as freedom of belief, conscience, and speech. I retweeted a comment made by conservative leader Pierre Poilievre about the unnecessary severity of the COVID lockdowns. I criticized Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I criticized Justin Trudeau's former Chief of Staff Gerald Butts. I criticized an Ottawa City Councillor, and I made a joke about the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. I did all that disrespectfully, by the way, in a horrific manner that misspread misinformation that was threatening and harassing, that was embarrassing to the profession. I am also, these are separate offenses, sexist, transphobic, incapable of the requisite body positivity in relationship to morbid obesity, and unforgivably of all, a climate change denialist. Every single one of these accusations and now accepted evidence of my professional misconduct is independent of my clinical practice, by the way, which has been suspended since 2017, when my rising notoriety of fame made continuing as a private therapist practically and ethically impossible. Every single accusation is not only independent of my clinical practice, but explicitly political. Not only that, unidirectionally explicitly political. Every single thing I have been sentenced to correction for saying is insufficiently leftist politically. I am simply too classically liberal, or even more unforgivably conservative. For criticizing our Prime Minister and his cronies and peers, for retweeting Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the official opposition in Canada, and for daring to express reprehensible political views, I have now been convicted by the College of Psychologists of harming people in some manner serious enough to justify my forced re-education. Now that I have refused, I will definitely face further exceptionally public, demanding, time-consuming, and expensive disciplinary action, including the suspension of my license. This despite the fact that none of the people whose complaints are currently pursued were ever clients of mine, or even knew of clients of mine, or even knew or were acquainted with any of the people they claim I am harming. This despite the fact, and please attest to this, that half the people who levied such complaints falsely claimed they had in fact been or currently are clients of mine. It may be of some interest to note that I wrote to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week, informing him of this situation. Here is the letter for public consideration, which by necessity repeats some of what I've just covered in this introduction. Dear Prime Minister Trudeau, I thought it my duty to inform you and your office of the proceedings against me. The Ontario College of Psychologists, the provincial government mandated and supported professional body charged with regulating the practice of clinical psychology, is requiring that I undergo a lengthy course of media training so that I more appropriately conduct my online communication. This is occurring, by the way, despite my 20 years as a research psychologist at Harvard University and the University of Toronto with an unblemished behavioral reputation. My extensive clinical experience and my history of bringing psychological knowledge to people around the world. Some 15 million people currently follow me on 3 main social media platforms, and the overwhelming majority of them appear to regard my words and the particular manner in which I formulate them as interesting, helpful, and productive. Some real evidence to the contrary with regard to the college's accusations. I have rejected this forced re-education request and will in consequence soon be required to appear in front of an in-person disciplinary hearing to bring me into line, with the threat of the revocation of my clinical license and public exposure and implied disgrace that would accompany that hanging over my head. It may be of interest to you to note that all of the complaints against me, 1, were brought by people whom I had zero clinical contact, 2, have nothing whatsoever to do with my function as a clinical psychologist except in the broadest possible public sense, and most importantly with regard to this letter, 3, that half of them involve nothing more than political criticisms of you or the people around you, with all the remainder being complaints generated because I dared state some essentially conservative philosophical beliefs. As the enclosed documentation indicates, I'm being investigated and disciplined for, among a few other reasons not germane to my present communication with you, retweeting Pierre Poilievre, the leader of Canada's official opposition, criticizing you, your former Chief of Staff Gerald Butts, New Zealand PM Jacinda Ardern, and an Ottawa City Councillor, and objecting to Ottawa police threatening to apprehend the children of the trucker convoy protesters. I am not suggesting or even presuming that you or any of the people associated with you had anything directly to do with this. However, the fact that it is happening and that physicians and lawyers have become as terrified as psychologists now are of their own regulatory bodies is something that has definitely happened on your watch as a consequence of your own conduct and the increasingly compulsion-based and ideologically pure policies that you have promoted and legislated. I simply cannot resign myself to the fact that in my lifetime I am required to resort to a public letter to the leader of my country to point out that political criticism has now become such a crime in Canada that if professionals dare engage in such activity, government-appointed commissars will now threaten their livelihood and present them with a spectacle of denouncement and political disgrace. There is simply and utterly no excuse whatsoever for such a state of affairs in a free country. Jordan B. Peterson, Ph.D. of Clinical Psychology, for now, Professor Emeritus at the University of Toronto. Why should Canadians who read this care? Perhaps those reading in this country and elsewhere might ask themselves the following questions, and in all seriousness, painful as it might be to do so, requiring as it does the almost unbelievable admission that something has gone dreadfully wrong in our lovely country. What makes you think something similar won't happen to you, or to someone you know or respect or even love? What makes you think that you are going to continue to be able to communicate honestly with your physicians, lawyers, and psychologists, and representatives of many other regulated professions, if they are now so terrified of the regulatory boards that they can no longer tell you the truth? What are your children going to be taught when all their teachers, yeah, that's a regulated profession too, are so afraid of the woke mob that they swallow all the ideological lies that are now required of pedagogues, regardless if they believe what they're saying? Where are we going to be if we allow criticism of the public figures charged with the privilege of our governance to be grounds for the demolition of not only the critic's reputation but their very livelihood? How far are we willing to go down this road without forthright resistance? In any case, I'm not complying. I'm not submitting to re-education. I'm not admitting that my viewpoints, many of which have, by the way, been entirely justified by the facts that have emerged since the complaints were levied, were either wrong or unprofessional. I'm not going to say what I have to say and let the chips fall where they will. I've done nothing to compromise. I am going to say what I have to say and let the chips fall where they will. Done nothing to compromise those in my care. Quite the contrary. I've served all of my clients and the millions of people I am communicating with to the best of my ability and in good faith, and that's that. To the College of Psychologists, I issue this challenge. I am absolutely willing to make every single word of this legal battle fully public so that the issue of my professional competence and my right to say what I have to say and stand by my words can be fought in full daylight. I would and could post all the correspondence with and accusations levied by those who complained about me in the college itself public, and will do so if the college agrees, but I can't on legal grounds justified in normal times but rendered specious by the dominion of the politically correct and radical. I can't because of this, and because it is not in the interest of the college or the complainants that they are sheltering and abetting to allow it. They'll cite confidentiality concerns for their refusal because it's 100% okay for them to come after me publicly, while they and those who complained hide cravenly and cowardly behind a wall of self-serving and protective silence. Self-protective silence, excuse me. This, of course, does little but embolden those who have learned to weaponize college disciplinary processes and to give the accuser and his or her lackeys the upper hand, practically and legally. And such weaponization risks placing all our once justly trusted institutions firmly in the hands of those willing and able to manipulate them for reasons both political and personal. The sad and sorry state of this once great dominion at the dawn of 2023, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. National Post. So, Dr. Jordan Peterson. Now, granted, I've had some disagreements about Dr. Peterson lately, but let me give you a toast. Here's to hopefully fighting this attack on your profession, attack on your ethics, attack on your freedom of speech. And hopefully Prime Minister Trudeau realizes that this looks bad and steps in and tells these colleges to stop taking internet beef so fucking seriously. Cheers, brother. Ooh, that Jim Beam Black's pretty good. Anyway, that's our show for tonight. So, definitely wish everybody a good start to 2023. Hope it's been a good 4 days so far. Let's keep it rolling throughout the month of January. You can help me have a good January by hitting that like button below, hitting that subscribe button below, hitting that notification bell so that you're aware next time I go live. Take this video, share it off platform. Get other people informed at what I want to inform you all about. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Yeah. Find me on Rumble. There's a bunch of links below. Rumble, Twitter, Locals, Facebook. You find all those below. I try to post when I'm going to go live or when I'm going to be skipping a show or be late to a show. I try to post there first as well. Locals, Twitter, Facebook. Oh, excuse me. Find all those links below. Follow me on social media. Come back here Saturday afternoon. We'll probably try to cover the Twitter files again. There have been a few more leaks of Twitter files. I didn't cover them on the show tonight because it's kind of more of the same. I mean, new information, but more along the same lines as the last couple. Spooky 3-letter government agencies wanted Twitter to meddle. in your free speech. But we'll cover some of that probably on Saturday. We'll see what's what. We'll break that down for you. Come back for that show. I'll try to dig a couple more interesting topics out of the gutter. So see you then. Until then, folks, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Don't get any on you. And if you do, rub that shit in real good. Love ya. Peace. Take care.